So last we worked on this hide, we were in Gulkana with Jeanie Maxim, and we were working on cutting all the hair off so we could work on scraping. We had to stop for the day, so we folded it up and put it in a Ziploc bag and stored it in a freezer. I took the hide out to work on it, and I'd given myself the day before for it to defrost, but it was a little bit of an overcast, cold day, and it just didn't defrost all the way, so I had to leave it out for a couple days and then put it back in the fridge to keep until I was ready to work on it. And when we were pulling it out, I had folded it up and all the flesh wasn't removed from the edges, so some of that blood and liquids went throughout the entire hide, so it made it really kind of difficult to continue cutting off the hair. So I had to leave it for another few hours to kind of dry out the hair a bit so I could cut it, because cutting it with the butcher knife while wet is actually really dangerous. So after it was dry enough, I was able to finish cutting off the hair as best as I could. So it's important to prioritize certain steps when you're working on this to create a kind of a more streamlined process in the future. And one step is fleshing the hide. So depending on how you get your hide, whether it's through a hunter or like this one through a roadkill program, you have to really make sure that the flesh is removed. The flesh is going to continue to rot, and it's going to get really stinky and difficult to work with as you prolong that step. You're also going to have problems with hydration, and it's going to start exuding liquids that will affect the hair side and make it really difficult to cut if you're prolonging that step. And then it's also going to create a really lumpy surface. So when you finally put your hide onto the log to scrape, you're going to create holes, and you're going to create a lot of issues for removing the epidermis and the rest of the hair. We're at the point now where we've cut off all the hair to that sort of buzz cut length, and we're going to use the nagige or the draw knife to scrape off both the hair and the epidermis at the same time. So you can see here where I've started scraping the remaining hair and epidermis, and using the nagige in a downward motion, we're basically cutting off that whole layer, and then it's the hair is helping us cut the epidermis off at the same time. You know, I hold the nagige at just kind of a slight angle because you're cutting into the hide, so you want to make sure that you're not going to be cutting too deep and creating holes. So you want to be wary to keep the angle of your knife the same throughout your whole process, so you have an even cut. What I'll do is just kind of start a line and try to go all the way down and keep it really even. As you get it going, the hair will start to kind of clump together, and you can kind of follow that. So you see this is the hair and epidermal layer that's starting to come off together. So it's really important to keep your hide moist as you're scraping with the nagige, because as it starts to dry out, you're going to get uneven cuts because it's going to start catching on the hide as it just naturally dries with time. Scraping your hide, it's going to take time. You know, you want to take your time so you don't create holes and have an even surface. And so you're just going to want to dip your hand in water and just moisten it every as it starts to dry. So I'm just spraying my hand with a little bit of water, to keep it. And you don't need to get the entire thing wet because you're working on little bits at a time. And you want to make sure you're cleaning your blade as well. So as it starts to get epidermis and hair on there, you're going to want a clean blade. So you can see now, how flush it is with your scraping log, how important it is to have a really smooth surface that you have your hide on, and then also a fully fleshed surface. Because if you had flesh all on the back of this, you would have these bumps and you'd be creating holes the whole time you're scraping. I noticed it catching and kind of cutting a little bit deeper. The hair was drying out a little bit too much, so I'm just moistening the spot that I'm working on. So you want to keep a really consistent up and down motion to keep it really smooth. And you don't want to cut too deep, because if I was to cut like this, I would cut just a hole right there. You also don't want to force it. If you feel like a part is catching, you want to stop, take a look at it, clean your blade, and then return back to it. So right here, the skin is clean, so it's very white and opaque. I've removed the epidermis, I've removed all the layers, you know, but I still have to come back up here and remove this part. So when you see this sort of yellow tinge to it, that means that some of the membrane is still on there. So you're going to want to keep scraping in the same kind of motion, that sort of same even motion, while it's moist, to remove that. So as you are scraping your hide, you're stretching it kind of over this surface. So you're going to want to keep kind of adjusting it, moving it up, and keeping it really flat and taut against the log. Otherwise, you're going to create holes and wrinkles and kind of an uneven cut. When you're using the cut method on the hair, you can tell that where the hair is really evenly cut into that sort of buzz length, it's really easy to scrape the hair and epidermis off in kind of an even motion. So you see right here where it's cut pretty well. When I scrape it, everything kind of comes off in a nice line. Where there's a little bit of unevenness, or the hair was wet as I was cutting it, it's a little bit more difficult to get an even scrape. So for this hide that I'm working on, for me, it's going to be a little bit easier to work on the fall, because it's going to be a little bit colder, so things will kind of remain at the same temperature. They aren't going to dry out too fast, and then also the bugs won't be so difficult to deal with, and it sets me up in a good place to put it out for the whole winter, and then start the smoking and tanning process in the spring. And as you move down on the hide, you're going to want to lift it and bring it back up, so you're not bending over too much and hurting your back. So here I'm working on this in sort of my urban environment on my apartment porch, you know, and so I'm working in a tub, and I'm using a log that has its own stand. But ideally, you'd want to put this, you know, work on this someplace where you could kind of get really close to it. You wouldn't have to lean over. You could sit down with it and, you know, just kind of let the hair kind of go back to nature. But here it's like you have to take care of it and find out ways that you can bring this back. So I'll probably take all this hair and dump it, you know, in the creek when I'm done. But that's just part of working in an urban environment. So I'm just coming back over here and just scraping off that yellow layer that was left behind. You know, and as you get more surface, you know, more of the hair removed, it becomes a little bit easier to see where it is you need to kind of go back. And then you can just kind of lightly go back through and pull it off in just little bits. When you need to get to the side parts here, you're going to really want to move your hide over so you're staying you know, flat on a flat surface, because as you're going at an angle, you're going to end up cutting with this corner here and creating holes. So with this method of cutting the hair as opposed to rodding it, you're really getting a lot more layers off as you're scraping it with the nagige to get to the opaque layer of skin. You can see that it's wanting to peel off as one. You also want to be really wary too of how you're feeling. You know, as you start to get tired, you're going to make mistakes and you're going to cut deeper than you intended, and there's really no going back when you cut too deep. So I'm starting to feel myself get a little tired, and you just tell that from your body and from how it is you're scraping on it. So I'm going to wrap it up and put it in a Ziploc bag and put it in the fridge so I can work on it in the next couple days. If I was in the position where I thought that I couldn't work on it for, you know, more than 3 days, I would need to put it into the freezer so it will keep